You're listening to Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk. Each week, your host, Polly Requa, interviews veterinarians and individuals in the pet industry from across the nation answering pet questions. Bark and Wag podcast is produced weekly for your enjoyment, and show notes can be found at barkandwag.com under the podcast tab. That's BARKNWAG.com. Please remember to subscribe to Bark and Wag 15-Minute Vet Talk.
Thank you for listening to Bark and Wag 15-Minute Vet Talk. Bark and Wag is dedicated to protecting our dogs through advocacy, education, and supporting like-minded dog lovers by selling custom pet products. Bark and Wag is excited to announce our new partnership with a Colorado hemp farm to produce a line of CBD products for your pets. Bark and Wag has CBD pet tincture available in 300, 750, 1200, and 2400 milligrams. Bark and Wag CBD is pet safe, no THC, it's made in the USA, and is CO2 extracted. Please check out Bark and Wag's website, barkandwag.com. That is BARK, to see our line of CBD and awesome merchandise. We love pooch ideas for podcasts and merchandise, so anytime send an email to Polly at barkandwag.com with your suggestions.
Welcome to Bark and Wag 15-Minute Vet Talk. I'm your host, Polly Requa. Today we're talking to Dr. Laura Brown, owner of Green Tree Animal Hospital in Libertyville, Illinois. Welcome, Dr. Brown.
Hey, Polly. Thanks for having me back.
We had a question from one of our listeners, and that is, what is pancreatitis?
Okay, pancreatitis is inflammation of your pancreas. And your pancreas, people have them too, is the organ that helps dogs, cats, and people digest their food. So when you eat, the pancreas is stimulated to shoot out these enzymes and help digest your food. So pancreatitis means their pancreas is inflamed. And in dogs, the most common cause of that is eating something fatty, greasy, high, like that kind of, like, here's my classic example is like bacon grease.
Okay.
And it causes the pancreas to get really inflamed. And so when the pancreas is super duper inflamed, the main symptoms of problems are vomiting, not eating, belly pain, and some diarrhea.
So what happens with this disease when your dog is older?
Well, the thing about pancreatitis, and as how I explain it to my clients, is there's kind of, on a scale of 1 to 10, there's probably a couple 1s and 2s out there roaming around that people don't even seek veterinary attention for. The dog vomits once or twice, misses a meal. By the time the pancreas rests a meal, then it feels better, mild, they go back to normal. To the 10s, and those guys are super duper sick. Super duper painful, fever, can't keep anything down. And those guys need to be hospitalized. They have to be hospitalized sometimes for days for IV fluids, IV pain meds, IV nausea meds, antibiotics, until things settle down and the pancreas feels better. And old or young, sometimes old is sometimes not just caused by eating something they shouldn't. If there's, inflammation in the GI tract or tumors or things like that come up just because dogs are older, then it can be a whole different ball game with older dogs.
So can it cause death?
Yes, it can. It's not super duper common, but a friend of mine, a veterinarian friend of mine's dog a long time ago got into the bacon grease that she kept under the sink, after you fry bacon. And long time, my mom used to keep that too, and he got into that, and he got super duper sick, and his pancreas abscessed, and he had surgery and hospitalization, and he did not make it.
Okay.
So it's not very common though, but like I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, some dogs do great, and the owners don't even feel like they need veterinary attention. Other ones are super duper sick and need to be hospitalized, and then somewhere in the middle. Probably what I see regularly more is some vomiting, diarrhea, hasn't eaten. We come in, we do some lab work, get some fluids, get some anti-nausea meds, go home on a bland diet. So the cure is to let the pancreas rest. to let it rest means to not feed for 12 hours to 24 and make sure they stay well hydrated. And then when you start to refeed, you have to feed them something bland and highly digestible, so as not to make the pancreas matter.
So is it usually when it's an older dog, there's something else along with it? Like
sometimes. I mean, it could be the same reason. As older dogs get a little older, if they're getting a little finicky about eating and people are being more generous with things to like spark their appetite, pieces of bacon, fried French fries are bad, greasy, fatty foods like that, pizza, those are the things that kind of spark it. And so, yeah. And some dogs are bad and they dig into the garbage and get into food they shouldn't and cause it. And other times, people feed their pets things and most of the time they have an iron gut and it never bothers them, but until the one time it does.
Okay. And then once they flush it out, and are you on an antibiotic?
Sometimes they get antibiotics. Sometimes they don't need antibiotics. It depends. Bland diet for a week to 2 weeks. And then there are some definitely repeat offenders. I mean, there's some dogs that schnauzers, for example, are common to have a high fat content in their blood normally, like genetically. So those guys are kind of predisposed to having issues with that. And so sometimes there have been, there's chronic pancreatitis cases out there that need to stay on a prescription low-fat diet all the time to avoid reoccurrences. But it's usually managed via diet versus medication. And then there's the one offset. The pancreas is intimately connected to the intestines, which is intimately connected to the liver. And then there's, potential. In cats, usually that's more of a combo disease called triad disease, where the pancreas, gut, GI tract, and liver are intimately inflamed by whatever inflammatory reasons there is, sometimes tumors. But the run-of-the-mill generic dog pancreatitis is usually pretty treatable, pretty well responds to treatments, and dogs go on to have no further issues if owners are careful about what they eat.
Okay. Well, thank you for all the information. We look forward to having you back on the podcast.
Thank you. Sounds good.
Thank you for listening to Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll pass along our web address, www.barkandwag.com, to your friends and other pet owners. Have a pressing question for a veterinarian? Ask your question at barkandwag.com under the podcast tab. This has been a KFR production. Join us next time for another edition of Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk.